Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sharing Our Stories. I'm Ann Crimmings, and glad you could join us tonight. We have an excellent session with Theresa Gibson, who I will introduce momentarily. But first, let me just go over our process and our procedures. This changes everything. First, we ask all Zoom audience members to please turn off your camera and your microphone to reduce background noise. You'll still be able to see the program and hear the program, but that will be better experience for everybody else on Zoom. The presentation will be about 45 or 50 minutes or so, followed by a question and answer session with both our live audience here in the library and our Zoom audience. If you're on Zoom, you can submit questions via chat, and we will read those questions out loud. And tonight, for our Zoom audience, we will be using the microphone for live audience questions as well, so that we're sure you can hear those questions. Our next Sharing Our Story will be on Thursday, May 30th. We usually meet on Tuesdays. You've immediately noticed that tonight is Monday. And now in May, Thursday. The library is very good to us, and we always request Tuesdays, but when they have one of their own programs they want to use this room for on Tuesdays, they of course get priority. So in May, we will be meeting on Thursday, May 30th. We're dotting the I's and crossing the T's on our speaker, so be looking for an email from Sharing Our Stories announcing our next speaker. But now I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight, Theresa Gibson. Theresa is the Welcome Team Coordinator at Community Refugee and Immigration Services, known far and wide as CRIS. In that role, she works with a variety of faith-based groups here in Franklin County who do a great deal of work to help refugees and refugee families get settled and start to build new lives here. She has worked in this field for a long time and has much to teach us tonight about the challenges that refugees face in building new lives here, and about how members of our community can help with this process if you're interested in doing so. So please join me in welcoming Theresa Gibson.
Great, thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
You want me to use the microphone, or can you hear me just fine without it?
Well, if you could put it right here. So
I'll put it here for the Zoom. That's better.
Yeah.
I get a little wobbly. I've got a bit of a balance struggle in life sometimes when I'm holding the mic. Hey, everybody, I see some faces I know, and hello. I am here in one of the most comfortable places in the world because this little corridor is where all my friends are. Every church on this street has had a welcome team, okay? Like everyone. I was just up at All Saints. I was just up at St. John's Episcopal. I was just talking to Tom Rice across the street today. And also community groups in Clintonville, very close to here, have also just members of neighborhoods done it. So I feel like this is a home and a very welcoming place for refugees. And I see some friends out there too. So I'm going to go through the general presentation about how refugees get here. I apologize. I know some of you have heard this, but we feel like at CRIS, especially in this election year, that there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about how people get here and what visas they're on. And we want to be there to answer questions and explain that. And I'm sure you'll want to have those answers for your friends and stuff. So I spend a little bit of time on that to start. Oh, do I tell you to switch or? I should have asked this. This one?
No, I'm just, yes.
Oh, I got it. Here's our list of services. And I think some of you are familiar. I want to That's okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna be talking mostly about resettlement. Chris has a lot of wraparound services, but a lot of what we do is that first 90 days that a refugee is here, that's resettlement. But I want to point out our legal services. You can call our office if you find an immigrant or a refugee. We often can't take them on as clients, but we do have special days where we bring everybody in and work on their green card, or bring up, like, all Haitians come in and work on your work permit. And we have been doing that recently, and so please, for your friends out there in the community, we want you to know that. We also have a very tiny but very robust victims of crime department. Any immigrant, anyone with limited English, if they're a victim of a crime or possibly domestic violence or something where they need taken care of and they may need some social work done for them, please give us a call. We are happy to help, and we have a department that does that. We have an older refugee and immigrant program that offers case management for folks over 60 that have come here as refugees and immigrants. They mostly just go on trips in our bus. Literally, the bus is out all the time. They're at parks, they're at stores. It's just a great little community thing. Community Connectors is a mentoring program with almost 200 mentors around Ohio, and that's open to any immigrant child. Age goes all the way down to like 8, but most of them are in that junior high, high school, young adult, to just get a mentor or to get someone who cares. So that's some of the stuff that we do at Chris. We're going to kind of dive into the resettlement process tonight. Just some of our families. I just texted Intisar there at the bottom. She actually has one extra kid now. She's got 11. She has a husband. He's camera shy. They got here 2 years ago. They're working hard. They're both working. They're paying their rent. They're living their lives. Their kids, all but one of them is doing good at school. We were texting about that today. New family from the Congo, a family reunification. So that's the kind of thing we do every day at Chris. This year, it's about 750 clients that we're going to resettle this year, whether it's from Congo or Afghanistan or Ukraine, Colombia, Venezuela, El Salvador, Eritrea, Uganda, Senegal. Those are the countries that have come recently. How do people get to the United States? You thought, oh, sorry, I can't back away. Sorry. You thought this isn't a literal ways you can immigrate to America. The refugee is one little square on here. I'm not going to go through that, but I want you to know that there is a big umbrella term is immigrant. And it's really anybody who is here legally, but they're not a citizen or a national. And so we could talk about all kinds of ways, whether it's you're a famous pianist or surgeon, or you're here to speak at a trial, or you've come for a business purpose on an H-1B visa or something like that. So that's the big umbrella term, all the different ways you can come. But then we'll talk about refugees. Refugees is any person who is outside of his or her own country and they are either unwilling or cannot return because of a well-founded fear of persecution. And it has to do with these 5 areas: race, religion, nationality, membership in a political or social group, and political opinion. And while we use the term refugee just really loosely, like we watch TV, we see Ukrainians of the West running to Kyiv, and we say those are refugees, and they are in fact refugees. But when I use the term, and we use the term in the refugee world, these are people who have actually applied with the United Nations, the UNHCR, and received that status. So that's a refugee. Now, a lot of people get confused about asylum seekers. An asylum seeker is the exact same reasons. That's anyone seeking protection based on those same 5 things: race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or political opinion. And so maybe they've left a war, maybe they've left a situation where they were going to die if they stayed, maybe they've left because a whole people group is being oppressed, or LGBTQ folks who are in a place where they could be jailed. That counts under that membership of a group. Asylum seekers are under the UN, and it's the same concept, but instead of fleeing to a second country in order to come to a third, they cross a border of a country, go to the UN, go to the government of that country, and ask for the asylum process to start. Then that's determined, and then they are either released to go continue that work of becoming an asylee, but that's an asylum seeker. And so a lot of folks we hear about at the borders, a lot of them are going to ICE, basically, and they're saying, I want to apply for asylum. They spend 72 hours allegedly there. They spend 72 hours there. They give their case, and the U.S. government decides, we going to put you back, or do we think this is worthy of a claim? Stamp your passport that you're legal to be here, and then set up your first meeting in whatever city you go to. That meeting happens in about a year. It happens right away, and then the real meeting happens in about a year and a half right now. So that's the difference. I want to tell a little story. These are my friends. Both of them had a welcome team from a faith-based group in Ohio, in the Franklin County area. They came the same month. They came in 2022 in the summer. The first family, crazy-haired Jose and Diana and little Hannah, we had an asylum program for one short month. And these guys, when they were in detention, they said, where do we go? We don't know anyone in the United States. And someone said, go to Columbus. And so they did. And so the folks in Texas are like, where do you want to go? We'll buy you the ticket. And they said Columbus. And that's how they got here. You've heard of that, right? And so they knew enough to call us. They had a phone. They got on Wi-Fi. They called us and they said, we're coming to the office. And they called me and they said, you're downtown. I live downtown. You're downtown. Go get them. Well, they'd come to the downtown bus station. But by the time I figured it out, they had walked to 161. And I was sad. But you know what? They had just walked 4,000 miles. They were fine. You know, that was nothing of a walk. And I met him, and we really can't do much for asylum seekers. I think we could give them $100 and a month of case management. But I called a church that had been waiting for a welcome team who gladly took them in Grove City and has been working with them through their immigration process. That was July of 2022. They just received a few months ago their work permit. They just received their work permit. Jose's brother and sister, whose son was dangerously diabetic and could possibly die, they decided to make the trek up. Chris didn't have a program, and I ended up hooking them up with some other friends and helping them out as well. So they're kind of a big family now, well on their way to being asylees. They're doing good. They've made it through the first legal processes and vetting. The other family came the exact month, Dennis and Rochelle. And they came from Ecuador, where they had been refugees for 2 years in a refugee camp. We assured them a few months before. They paid a plane ticket. They flew here, a nice church in Canal Winchester, David's Church of Christ in Canal Winchester. Went to the airport, met them. They got off the plane. They had work permits. They had visas. They were able to sign up the very next day for food stamps and health cards. This family in 6 weeks had a big TV, a car, 2 full-time jobs, and were pretty much off of any kind of services other than healthcare for the first 6 months. They were fine. They left for the same reason. They left for the same reason. They're very similar families. The refugee route does all the vetting up front before they come. The asylee route, they have to work it out. And so while you can be denied it either way of that route, as many asylum seekers do not receive approval and may return or could possibly return depending on the country. Refugees, when they get here, are here to stay. They're going to stay. So that's the difference. Who's heard the term parolee in a refugee sense, not in that you are in jail and on parole. I had a church think that their person really was on parole. That's not the case. Parole is granted by the US government as a temporary, it shields them from deportation temporarily while they work through either the asylum process or the green card process. This often happens with countries that have a relationship with us. Something happens very quickly, like in the Ukraine or in Afghanistan. There's not enough time for that 10-year refugee timetable. And if they come here, they're given that parole status, but they still have to work out all that vetting and all that legal work. And it's very complicated. You can ask me questions about it later. Right now, these are most of the parolee folks that we are seeing. Each country is different. For example, Venezuelans do not get work permits for 18 months. Nicaraguans do get work permits in a couple months. Each one is on a different, and it changes all the time. But I think if you walk around our city, you know that especially Haitians, we are seeing more and more of, and that's because they're here legally. They are under that parole system. Okay. Said I talk a little bit about the history of refugee resettlement. There's a couple Syrian refugees there. I've been to that camp, by the way. I get so excited when Syrians come because I got to work there for a while. really after World War II, we had the Displaced Persons Act, and that was obviously displaced Europeans. Some of the folks we know in Ohio are from there. And then in 1975, we started for Vietnam, we started a new refugee program where 100,000 Southeast Asian refugees came. And then under the Carter administration, we're still working under this act, was the Refugee Act of 1980. And how it works is every September, the president and Congress get together and they decide on a refugee ceiling. They decide which refugees are going to receive priority. They decide the number of refugees that are going to come, and they give that to us October 1. They give that to us resettlement agencies and the National Resettlement Office. Every year it's different. Last year it was single mothers out of Africa had a priority, and we resettled a lot of them. This year, it's been everybody, actually. Some Syrians have been clearing out. There's still Afghans coming, and we expect to see more South and Central Americans in the second 2 quarters of this fiscal year. That's all decided at the very top. And that 125,000 is a goal. It's a goal because things were pretty dismantled over the previous administration. It's taken a while to build back up enough infrastructure in the refugee camps to even get all the vetting done and all the medical checks done. And so the average refugee right now is waiting 5 to 15 years in order to come here. It used to be a little bit closer, but it's getting better. We know it's getting better because we're exhausted at Chris. They have been coming pretty fast and furious. And so that's how they come. And I think it's gone pretty well. And it's been bipartisan this whole time. It really has. I used to, back when I was doing some advocacy work, I would see who sponsored the bill and I was like, are you kidding me? They sponsored the bill? But both Republicans and Democrats have often agreed on refugees, and often because they realize that it strengthens our ties overseas. It puts us as a moral leader on the world stage. It strengthens our alliances as we help these countries that help refugees, and we fulfill our promises by taking them. And so although things have been dicey lately, it really has been historically a very bipartisan and something that is done not just because of Statue of Liberty and we're good humanitarian people, but because it really strengthens us internationally in a big way. All right. I usually stop for questions, but I have questions at the end, so I'm going to keep plowing through. But if I miss something, raise your hand. I'll ask. So we're going to talk a little bit about that process, just so you know how does a refugee get here. So we're going to imagine somebody. Well, imagine my friend Intisar, who has the 11 kids and is working and doing great. When she was younger, her and her family, they have arranged marriages. There was a terrible war in Sudan, and they wanted one of their children to get out. And they married one of the children to who's a little bit older than her. And they left, they had no children yet, and they went to Jordan to be refugees, where they stayed for 18 years as refugees. They could never be Jordanian citizens. They could never work legally. They could never would be stateless. So it took them that long to work through the process. In those 18 years, that's when they had all those kids. That's just one example. So we're going to kind of imagine a family like this, or maybe a little family of 4 Somalis who have left the war. As we talk through this. I forgot this slide used to be later. 108 million forcibly displaced people in the world as of mid-2023. Why is that higher now? Why is it higher? Yes. Yeah, Congo has really kicked up. Who else has really kicked up in the last 6 months? Haiti. Palestine. Haiti doesn't come as refugees, but they're in that, they're still displaced people. Yeah. Palestine. So you got Palestine, Sudan, Congo, still got some problems in Eritrea, and you've still got an absolute Haiti and Venezuela, just really failed states at this point, and just impossible to live because of the gang. So that's a little bit higher. You can see the figures there. That asylum seeker figure is low. Countries don't report on that. And so it's hard to know worldwide what that figure is at. That 5.2 million is actually mostly Venezuelans. They gave them their own category. That country cleared out so quickly that the UN, and I think there was hope they would be back. The UN gave them a different category. Most refugees are housed in poorer countries and lower income countries. That puts a huge stress on them and those people. We think of Lebanon, right? and Turkey would be the big countries there. So that's kind of it at a glance. As they leave, they flee their home country. They register with the UNHCR. The UNHCR can immediately say no or yes. If they say yes, you can start the journey. You can start the process. 3 things can happen. One good thing that happens is maybe they could be repatriated back to their country. And I would say that normally doesn't happen in someone's generation. So you may live with your family as a refugee until you pass away, but your children will return. And that does happen. Maybe the war is over, maybe things have changed enough that they can leave. So many refugees, just the process is too long, or they find a way to work, or they marry somebody, or maybe the language is similar, they integrate into their host country. In both those situations, that's the end of their refugee journey. The people that do this long path of getting to a third country, that's what we call refugees in our country. People who, lots of countries take refugees. Every country is different on how they handle their refugees. We have the Congress and president deciding the limits, and we have an attitude about our refugees that's work right away. And you'll see why this is in a minute. You need to work and learn. You need to learn English while you work, and you need to work right away. It's 90 days is the amount of time that we in the United States give refugees to get their lives in order. So each country is different. So imagine, my friend Endastar, you're meeting. First thing you do is you meet the UNHCR. They say, hey, the United States might be a good bet for your family, depending on if they had friends or family here, if it's a country, some that we're taking. And so they would meet with the Refugee Service Center. Those are Americans. This shows one meeting. It would be several meetings. You have to set it up. The RSCs move into a refugee camp, have meetings for a few days, move out, move in the next year, have meetings and move out. You're proving who you are. You're giving phone records. You're giving birth records. You're proving that you are who you say you are, and you're telling your story. If it's thumbs up from there, it goes to a deeper level of vetting with the USCIS, with ICE. And that's where you do the watch lists and a whole deeper round of vetting. At any point, you could be rejected. At any point, your case might change. Like maybe you have a baby and you kind of have to go back to the beginning to start your case over. So that's why a lot of times it takes so long. If you're approved, then you wait for a slot to open up. If you're denied, you go back to the country you're staying in. There's some medical evaluations, a little bit of cultural orientation, and then you wait for an opening. We call it an assurance, and then an organization like us hopefully will meet you. Now, who buys those plane tickets? How do they get here? Because, you know, we're just paying for everybody to come here. How are they getting here? The US government takes out a no interest loan in their name. The payments start exactly 6 months after arrival. They get a letter, they get a phone call, and they start making payments until they pay it off. So my friend Intastar is looking at $9,000 to pay off for her family. And they do. Refugees do it all the time. They know all about it. They know about the refugee travel loan. That's how they get here. They come through 10 national agencies. In our town, we have, and then the national agencies have little resettlement agencies like Chris. We're affiliated with Church World Service. There's also Jewish Family Services, Episcopalian Migration Ministries, Lutheran Social Services has a branch that handles that, Catholic bishops, International Rescue Committee. A lot of them are from faith-based backgrounds, but they're not necessarily a faith-based organization. In other words, at CWS, anybody from any religion can work there, but there's 10 refugee resettlement organizations. They are given some money. They're given a grant, and they're given to a resettlement agency like us to help them transition in those 90 days into life here. Each refugee is given $1,325 one time. So a family of, you'll see what family of 2 gets $2,650, a family of 3, $39.75. I have some friends, we don't take clients with that. Well, no, I'm lying. A 10-person family coming soon. $13,250 for a big family. So that's what they have to start off with. That's for the deposit, the rent, the utilities, some basic things that they need, housing supplies that aren't donated, their welcome kit, their welcome meal, their welcome dinner, food for their house until they get on an EBT card. That's what that money is given to Chris, and we manage it for them, but they sign off on every dime we spend. And at the end of the 90 days, if there's any left, there's never any left. Because it all disappears with the deposit, right? If you can find a place for a family of two to live for the first 3 months for $26.50, it's not out there. So that's where Chris has funding from other sources to help them along the way. But we manage that money as part of our resettlement program for them. And here are the things that we do at Chris. It's about 16 services that our case managers provide. And you can look at that list. A lot of it is this kind of the government red tape, applying for things, making sure people get PCPs and doctors and get into WIC, making sure kids are enrolled in school. We have a 6-hour cultural orientation in their language that all refugees can take. And then at the very end of that, if there's any resettlement and placement funds, that's RNP funds, we pay more to their rent or give it back to them. So that's what we do. And it's a scurry because we usually find out about 2 weeks, unless they're from Afghanistan, and then it's about 4 days before they come. And so as soon as we see those, it kind of populates our emails and we're like, okay, this family's coming. We start looking for housing. We start looking for volunteers, and we've got a couple weeks to get things together until they're here. And then our case manager plows through that over the next 30 days. Always, they need to have a job as soon as possible. So that's that. Oh, this is just, I don't go at this. This is just how much people got a couple years ago. I think it's a little more. I think some people say, hey, they just come here and they just live off public assistance. So you think of a little single mom with 2 kids, like my friend Katie. She came here with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. She gets $630 a month. And if you can find a 1-bedroom apartment for $630 a month, that would be fantastic. We find that, and the food stamps with the increase in prices. So it's not a lot. It's not a lot. So they need to work very quickly and get some more help. And that's the process. There was one thing. I feel like a slide's missing. I'm going to stop there and ask for a couple quick questions. Is there anything you think I missed before I move on? And take a drink of water while you think. If that was a lot. Yes.
So how do you determine that they're legal? They have to be legal for you to provide any service.
Oh, absolutely. They're coming through a
Well,
huge program. Yeah.
We know, but no, I was just asking about the process you go through to determine they're legal. For instance, John and I know a couple that have 2 children. And they came from Mexico, but they're Afghani.
Right, but they went to the UNHCR or they went to ICE.
Yes.
When they crossed the border. They have to give their information. They probably had a 72-hour wait. They were they separated, John?
No, the family of 4 used the new app.
Oh, they use the app. So they apply with the app outside. And then they are then the US government decides if it's legitimate or not legitimate. And then they're legal to be here, but they don't have a lot of what refugees have. They fall under that asylum seeker category. So, and in order to apply, they have to provide a bunch of information and provide a bunch of data and evidence. And so that's a great question. That's how we know. We aren't allowed, I wish we could, we aren't allowed to work with them because our funding is for people who come through the refugee program, not up through the asylum program.
But you worked with Theresa and Zara, and they came in through your program.
They did. The RNP funds were available for legitimate folks who work for the US government up until September 30th.
How long did it take them to get work?
9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9 months.
So the expectation, real or unreal, right
Yeah.
now, having used the app is.
We're hoping 3 months.
3 months.
We're hoping because it's a lot.
Yeah.
But they have family here. I think they'll be good. Okay, one more and then I'll move on.
So it seems like the first 30 days is kind of like the weed out class almost, so you would pass or fail. So what percentage of the people that you take on actually make it past the first 30 days before they decide either they're gonna go home? or-
100% stay.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I don't know. I bet 90% find work and are by 4 or 5 months are doing fine. Yeah, and they have to stay. They can't go back. It's unsafe. No, they do fine. They do fine. I'll be honest, a single mom takes longer. Single mom takes longer, but if there's a couple breadwinners in a family, it's all right. We find them jobs. We have 60 different companies across. People want our clients to work. They want them. I've got one hotel downtown that's just like, we'll take more, we'll take more. And if they make $15 an hour and have 2 people working, they're gonna be all right. They're gonna be all right. So yeah, no, they all stay. I've never known anyone to go back at all. Sometimes they go to another city. Sometimes they land and they're like, you know what, this was missed. My uncle's in Dallas. And then we just call a group like us in Dallas and we make the transfer. It happens a few times a year. That's no problem. We have the same people come to us that way too. Great question. All right, just real quick, just shout out, what are the top 8 big problems you would have coming here as a refugee? Now we're assuming they can work. Language, health care, housing, transportation,
Loneliness.
isolation, discrimination.
Cultural differences.
Yeah, just be in a whole new place.
Culture.
Huh?
Culture.
Culture. I think you guys got all of them. What I like to do during this part is to talk a little bit about some stories about what they do struggle with, and also how Chris helps and how our just army of volunteers helps folks get resettled here. So I think housing is our biggest problem right now in Columbus, Ohio, and countrywide. It is our biggest problem. It is difficult to take a single without family to move with right now. You can't make enough money to pay your rent. Maybe you have some kids at home that are not at home that are wondering, saying, I can't live alone. I have to have a roommate. I know that's where my daughter's at right now. So, and so it's very hard to secure affordable housing. The average 2-bedroom right now is $1,400. The average 1-bedroom is $1,200, close to $2,000 for a 3-bedroom. That's what we're looking at. So, and it's scarce, and they don't have a rental history or a credit score. So there's these 2 young girls that I work with, Laura and Anna, and you know they've housed 600 people this year. They're just making the calls. They're talking to landlords. They're explaining our folks pay rent. We've never had an eviction. They are just working it, and it gets harder and harder as big companies buy things up and it becomes national. It's easy when it's just, a person. So that's just the tightness in our market. That's tight for everybody, just not for refugees. It's tight for us as well, right? A big problem we have is everything's electronic now. And so you've got to do your maintenance and your rent through a portal. Many of our clients don't read in any language yet, right? And so they've got to learn. We've got these little graphs and diagrams. We all try to help everyone learn how to use the portal. It's easy to have miscommunications with landlords. It's easy to have landlords cheat you. And I think it's pretty good anymore. We work with some pretty great landlords right now, but it's happened. It's happened that our clients have been double charged or stuff like that. So the help from the community is really just getting the word out that our clients are great and that we want rental properties and individuals who own homes to work with us, and that you don't have to raise your rent just because everybody else is, right? That there are safe places for our clients to live. The other thing that claim housing is we take donations, which some of your churches here, I know some people here who do this, that will send in a whole refugee kit, a whole kit. Like it's like what you send your kids to college with, right? It's what you put in the trunk. Just the basic stuff for a house. And that doesn't come out of their initial money. We get furniture donations. We work very closely with the Furniture Bank of Columbus, who very inexpensively brings furniture out. And so that's how that happens. We also have teams that help people move in. This guy in the end, Eagle Scout John, his Eagle Scout project was 50 beds. He raised the money for the bedding. He built the beds himself. He came to 50 different clients. He would come out, build the bed, put up the bed, and leave. So for 50 clients in a row, they didn't have to use any of that money on beds. Right now, every client that comes has to spend $200 per client on a bed because we can't store beds. We can't. Yeah, so it's kind of hard. Food insecurity is hard. I just took, first of all, limited income. And so sometimes there's a gap between when they come, they've got to get a little bit of welcome money, and then when the food stamps kick in. So we do have struggle with usually 2 or 3 weeks if that's delayed. And that's where we call out to the community and say, can you give a gift card for a family of 4? That's called a grocery gram. We get a lot of help that way. And sometimes people just go buy a week's worth of food. That's great. Inexperience is a big deal. I've moved my family to another country in a great situation. And I moved to Taiwan and I was like, we're going to save money and eat Taiwanese food and buy it on the streets for $1 like everybody else. And 3 weeks later in 2005, I paid $12 for Rice Krispies, right? Because my kids were going to starve to death if they didn't have it. And it's the same for these guys too. Maybe they've lived, I just took people who've always been in a refugee camp. They've hadn't been in the country more than 15 hours. We went to Kroger's. And all they bought was fruits and vegetables. I know they like spaghetti sauce. I know they do. But the packaging was different. They didn't know what was in it. I finally snuck and opened a loaf of bread and was like, eat this, you'll like it, you know. And they all bought the bread, right? I talked them into some Twinkies too. But anyway, you know, it was their first day. Everything looked different. They couldn't read it. So I'm going to go back tomorrow and take them back out. And I think they probably will figure it out by then. And it's also hard to get to a grocery store. Many people want to go to their local store and stuff like that. They're closest to a Kroger's. They're not going to go to the Aldi's. And just not knowing what you're doing. They don't know not to shop at Whole Foods week 1, right? They were like, I don't even do that. It's hard. So there's that. Welcome teams provide weeks worth of food and individuals do too. So that's a family of 3 Afghans, 1 week's worth of food that really helps that family out and welcome meals pantry. We really depend on our, this was in a Vineyard presentation. That's why I'm promoting in there. We really depend on things like WIC and people who can help them learn how to use the Kroger card, and especially food pantries, which we are blessed in the city to just work with great people in food pantries. The Worthington Food Pantry is phenomenal. And a lot of our clients don't need it after the first few weeks, but they do need it that first few weeks. So transportation, oh, there's a slight problem. Transportation. Boy, if you have a job in a car, you'll make it, right? They're not going to have a car for a year. My friend John, he's a great guy. He was at the hotel next to Riverside. So while he was waiting for his permanent housing by himself, walked over to Riverside, filled out an application, got a job, right? But then the only place we could move him to was Old Town East. And so now he's 2.5 hours a day on the bus to get to his job. And I don't know, it's Ohio Health. I think he can probably move to Grant, right? Pretty soon, but that's just hard. So they have to save for a car and learn to drive. They can't see other parts of the city. It's really transportation to work that's the most important. And there's a group called Rides for Refugees that helps out several of our clients every year learn how to drive, and they help them purchase a car with a matching grant. Welcome teams help clients purchase cars with matching money. They teach each other how to, I mean, you can't believe how fast people get their temps. They want to drive, they get it. You're here about 2 days, right? You're like, I need a car, right? About 2 days. So that's hard on them. So we try to teach them how to use CODA. We do. They all have to learn how to use CODA. We have volunteers teach them to drive. That's my car. My car is notorious for being used for driver's tests because I have really good insurance. So I give it out to people and let people drive. This picture with all the smiley faces is because Afghan women do not allow their face on social media. But this is a women's ESL class that work together on getting their driver's permits and their driver's license. And that's their proud ceremony. And here's the secret now. A lot of them are driving Uber Eats, right? While their husband's at work all day, they can go out at night and hit up Uber Eats, and they're driving to work and they're driving their kids to school by themselves. And the Afghan women, right? It's exciting. And they're all, I've been with them sometimes. They're like, you get your license. Like if one of them doesn't do it or is afraid, they're like, oh no, we're doing it. We're doing it. So that's really fun. And also just one thing someone mentioned, isolation, loneliness, and things like that. And so that's most of our case managers have about 50 clients that just roll through. Every few days they get a new client. About every 3 or 4 days they get a new client. So they're just doing this. They can't be friends with them. They can't show them to the park. They can't show them 3 different grocery stores. They can't do any of that. And so that's where we depend on volunteers and interns and mentors to provide guides. You know, there's this little family in Clintonville, their friends and neighbors helped them get to Whetstone Library to take ballet and join some teams. Without that, they're isolated. They never know what kind of services we have. We don't even have time to think about doing that as far as the staff at Chris. But friends and neighbors do have time to help people learn how to mow their lawn. Right now it's the lawn mowing. Everyone's calling us. It's in my lease that I have to mow the lawn. What do I do? And so we have to find volunteers to take a lawnmower over, show them how to mow a lawn, maybe find some donated lawnmowers, bikes, stuff like that. So all of that.
You haven't mentioned, you said call, cell phones, postal address, internet access.
We do that right away. First night, everyone gets a cell phone, everyone gets internet by the next day. Everyone's pretty savvy at leaving voice messages using translators. I did this so long ago. I did this in the 80s, okay? I can't believe I did what I did. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how those Cambodians survived. But now that part is pretty easy. Most case managers have language skills for the people they have, so they can call their case manager. And if not, we have a program on our phone, and we teach them right away how to text us and how to use a translation app. It's fascinatingly smooth communication compared to even 5 years ago. Great question. Everyone wants to learn English. There's a lot of barriers. You see some of the barriers here. Sometimes the husband's out of the house, learns it very quickly. That really kind of puts the wife at really never able to learn it. Some people can't get to English classes because they don't have transportation. Everyone steps off the plane and says, English job, English job. Those are the two things I really want. But in reality, it's hard and it takes a long time. I lived at a place for 10 years and I can't speak Chinese and I really wanted to learn, right? So they are desperate to learn English, and they do learn, and their kids learn. And sometimes it creates some family dynamic problems because the kids kind of have to take the role of the parent after they're the ones that learn. We had one client, true story. Their kid said he was off school for 2 weeks, and there was a vacation, and she called our office, and he was just suspended. But the letters and the phone calls and the emails that were coming through, mom couldn't read. So he tried to pull one over on her there. And so you can see this is a little group of people that helped out in the summer. They're helping out now too with some other things, some newly arrived Afghan refugees. We have ESL classes that are attached to our jobs programs. So you have to be in the jobs program to take them. And I think we're finally bubbling up and getting more ESL classes in the Central Ohio. COVID just killed them all. We were pretty robust before COVID. And then everything died, and it's the churches and nonprofit groups are starting to pop up with ESL. So hopefully that'll help. And obviously employment. Doesn't matter what you did before. Doesn't matter if you were a translator. Well, actually you did get jobs if you're a translator, but if you worked very high up in the US military, or if you were a doctor, if you were a truck driver, those certifications do not translate. You are going to start at the lowest wage. You're going to start second or third shift. You just have to do it that way. You have to start. I remember teaching this, Carlos, and Carlos would, boy, he was lousy at learning English. I felt bad for him. He was older and he really struggled. And one day he was struggling with some bird testers, and he looked up at me and he yelled at me and he said, I delivered babies in Cuba. Right? So not only have you lost your friends and your family and your country, you've probably had a terrible trauma. You've also lost your career, and I don't know about you, but I live for this. I hate to move somewhere and have to make beds. But that could happen. That could happen. So.
I think it starts at 8.
So that's why we work hard on that. We have jobs programs at Chris, a really robust match grant for those.
So 7 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock.
For our single clients for settlement services. If they don't qualify for our programs, they go to a TANF. And they get associated with a jobs program, but they have to work very quickly. Very quickly. These slides got messed up. And back with the isolation point, if they don't have a lot of family here, refugees do not have connections in the community, and so it's those touch points. It's volunteers. It's getting to know the people at the library. It's getting to know their teachers. Columbus school teachers have just been great with our clients. and being able to get to know them. And so these are just some pictures of welcome teams that I've had, hanging out with their families, and moving them in and hanging out with them and creating those connections. They're not going to have American culture. I mean, they're who they are. We're who we are. But just to have that connection, to know what's available, to understand why we are the way they are, to learn about them and be open and curious about why they're different, it is a joy. To me, it's one of my favorite things in the world. And more times than not, even after 30 years, I'm like, oh, I was really wrong there. I didn't get that. I didn't get that dynamic. I did not get that. I did not get that he felt so ashamed, or what she was trying to say. And it makes me better. It makes me better. And so I think it's great that they're in our community. So helping with that. How am I doing on time here?
Few more minutes.
Okay.
Do some questions.
I'm gonna recently this year, there have been from Health and Human Services, also from the Immigration Foundation back in January, there have been some great studies. It is not all sad for people without a car and a job and can't speak English. Refugees are doing great in America. They're doing fantastic. And there was a study, you can look it up. It came out in June. There's two, actually. I can give it to you afterwards. It's on my computer, but I couldn't use my computer. I was going to pull those up. But refugees pay billions of dollars. I think in 2019, it was like 90 billion or something. And they had $60 billion in disposable income, and they paid $20 billion in taxes. Something that really helps our economy. Remarkable entrepreneurial spirit. I think it's 13% of refugees start businesses. Immigrants, it's 9%. Americans, it's like 6%. So 13%. Refugees are job creators. They're creating jobs, they're creating economies. And I don't have to tell people in Columbus, Ohio that. You know how horrible things were over off of like Agler Road until the Somalis started coming here, and those places were empty, and now they're, when I left the United States, I left for 10 years. I had this job teaching Somalis who were just arriving. When I returned about 11 years later and I went to the doctor, the PA was Somali. When I took my mom to a lawyer to work on her will, the lawyer was Somali. And I was like, 15 years, half a generation, right? Just amazing. And I think you see it here with the Bhutanese and Somali, and we will see it with the Afghans as well. High rates of ownership. Their citizen attainment, by 20 years, it's about 90% become citizens. It's a lot of money and it's hard to do, and they do it. And home ownership, although not as high as Americans, it's still up there at 60%. They buy their own homes. And they take jobs initially that they just, the studies are great. Please look them up. That's all I can say. I don't want to spend too much time on it. There was a study, this is an old one, just so you see some Franklin County only numbers. Refugees are about as likely to go to college, twice as likely to start a business, and more likely to enter the workforce. They tend to come here younger and that's going to be really important for us to replace our aging population. If you look at the percentages, and they do that as well. So, and some of those studies are about immigrants and refugees, still real positive. This one study I was showing you early is about refugees. All right, I'm about done. We have volunteer opportunities. Because you came to this, I know I have a lot of friends here. You are qualified now to volunteer at Chris. You don't have to sit through another training, okay? I got about 80% of it in, I'm counting it, okay? So if you ever want to volunteer for us, you don't have to jump through that hoop. These are the kind of volunteers we have. Some folks volunteer as needed, some folks volunteer weekly, some folks like to switch around and do different things. Some people are like, I just want to help someone learn to drive, or I just want to help someone learn a little English. So we always have needs in those areas, and even administration needs. And what I really love with faith groups and community groups is to work with teams. And we have a variety of teams depending on the size and how much time they have and the resources. We can pretty much, my condo association of 4 couples, we're in a rival team next week. And we're just kind of doing the minimum. We're doing the welcome kit and meeting at the airport and providing some food for a week. That's all we're doing. And it's really going to help that family. Other teams like John, like my friends over here from St. John's and Worthington United Methodist, they walk with a family for 6 months and they meet them at the airport and just are with that family in and out and help them as well. So that's what they do. offering friendship and support. Okay, I'm done. Please give me some questions. And I know I don't talk about what kind of refugees we have. I've got slides on those if you want them. I don't talk about why they're leaving. I don't have that memorized as well. I have it on slides, but I can answer. Let me answer as many questions as I can.
I'm wondering what Chris does to help get them enrolled in schools.
We are required by our contract to enroll them within 30 days. The sticking point with school enrollment is the TB test. Because they go to a refugee. First of all, there's only 2 places in town that can do that. When they're first refugees, they have to come for this huge battery of tests to make sure they don't have any illnesses or whatever. Sometimes that takes 2 weeks. Then we've got to wait for that TB test to come back. The second the TB test comes back, we enroll them in school, usually that day. Then if it's Columbus City, if it's Worthington, Westfield, Dublin, Arlington, we have two clients in Arlington. That happens usually the same day. If it's Columbus, it's usually another 10 days. The sticking point of it, one of the places we use closed for a month, and those kids were going crazy. We have just worked with Columbus City Schools to maybe jump the line on the TB test. It's the TB test. We could enroll them the next day if it wasn't for that TB test.
There's so much disinformation about immigrants.
Yeah.
And somehow we've got to find a way of counteracting what people are saying about the quality of the immigrants, and they're not working, they are using our resources. Do you have any insight as to what we can do?
I think just talk to our neighbors. I think the thing that helps the most is meeting an immigrant and learning what they go through. I think that really helps a lot. And of course, there are people who scam the system, Americans and immigrants. Of course, there are some problems with housing and over. Of course, I'm not blanketly saying they're all, walk on water, but the vast majority of immigrants in the city are working. They are helping each other get the social supports they need, and they are getting their kids to school and things like that. Now, I do know that the school district does struggle if there's a big influx on getting people set up. It's really fine at the beginning of the year. If you come later in the year, sometimes the classes are all full and you get bussed far away. But yeah, I think it's getting to know somebody, understanding the pathways of how they get here. Even the asylum seeker pathway, it's a pathway, and just getting to know them and sharing it with our friends. Because once you have an immigrant friend or a refugee friend, you get it. You get it. So great question. I wish I knew. I want to talk everywhere. Yes. Oh, she's doing it.
Do you have a handful of businesses or industries that you commonly call when you have new
Yes,
refugees?
we have 60 companies that we have made long-term relationships with, and we are always looking for more. Currently, I'll just let you know, Walmart, Acoustifiber glass, auto glass. We've got clients out of the Amazon warehouse. We work a lot with local hotels. The Junta downtown is pretty much all Chris clients right now. Someone got an in there. Honda has really helped us out a lot and helped our clients out a lot. And then for clients who come with more skills, it's been Pfizer and some government jobs and jobs in the school systems as translators. The clothing industry, the auto industry, the majority of folks who don't speak English right away are in logistics. If they come with some skills, they tend to go to retail or even up into, Riza's a his wife Zara's a civil engineer. Riza is a project manager with an elevator firm. I actually helped him get that job. I'm very proud. So yeah, but we have to talk to business owners. We have to tell them. If we can get one person in there that has some language and gets to a manager, then we can often have more folks. Oh, Marzetti's.
Do you
So-
also have a handful of apartment complexes?
Yes.
Or landlords you work with?
We
Can you
do.
name anything?
I'm lousy at that. I tell you, there's a group of them along Sawmill Road, Arbors of Dublin, Sawmill Park Apartments. I'm lousy with the names. There are some that we end up saying, no, we won't work with you anymore. The sad part is when we have one that really works well with us and then they get bought out. I don't know if you've heard about the Riverview International Center, nonprofit helping immigrants. 88 families just lost their home, including the Riverview International. It's a crisis. We're losing sleep over it. That was crisis. So we like to get the word out. We also have individual landlords that'll call us. My friend Tom Maxwell called and he's like, look, I got this house sitting here. It's up July 1st, and we also can show that it's fair housing and we have lawyers we work with. We're not, slipping anyone. We work hard on that. So it's a crisis for everyone in Columbus. So yes.
I just want to know, do you know all these immigrants coming from other countries, if they have a kids under 5 years old, are you familiar with the WIC program?
Everyone, we are required to enroll children under 5 in WIC.
Because I'm a dietitian for
Yeah.
for Nationwide Children's Hospital.
All right.
So I do have a lot of clients from that. It's nice to hear because I'm trying to get more information, but one of my clinic is immigration, international.
Yeah.
And you said about we have a lot of, when Somali came to US, and now in one of my clinics, most of the nurse and the
Are
coworkers
Somali.
are Somali.
It's great. And WIC is very helpful. WIC is very helpful to us. I also have several volunteers that really enjoy those WIC appointments and they don't have a problem getting people to WIC really.
Hi, so when you were talking about, people can decide that they can go to other cities. So if somebody is here in Columbus and they decide that they can find places to go to work and live in Cleveland, do you continue with their progress?
The first 90 days, so it's usually because they're leaving to see a family member or a friend. After 90 days, we have a talk, we sign some papers, we're done. We have some wraparound services, like we have a big wellness department. So yeah, I was been wondering about the Afghans. Got about 1,000 Afghans came to Columbus and we've been going, are they gonna be like the Cambodians that all left after 10 years? Or are they gonna be like the Somalis that kind of stayed? And it's been kind of a push. Some have moved to Texas and California where they had family. Others have moved here for jobs. People move for jobs. That's why they move.
You go for services after?
We offer medical services, family services, victims of crime services, older immigrant services, and mentoring services after those 90 days. But the reality is we help people for about a year. Yeah.
But they have to stay here in order to get those services?
Yeah, because it's usually just helping them with local social services. We have a lot of volunteers that help with what we call post-arrival services. Because some families need help for more than 3 months, but refugees have every right that you have, except they cannot vote. They can't vote, of course, they're not citizens. They can't return to their home country without losing their status, but they can move, they can buy a house, they can get a job, they can move to another state, they have every right that we have. And in 1 year, that's the slide that was missing, by the way. It was explained all this. In 1 year, they get a green card. And then in 5 years, they can apply for their citizenship, although it usually takes longer because of language and money. Yes.
Some say when they come in, they have no status, they don't have passports. So how do they go?
They come in with a document called an I-94 if they're a refugee, and that works as a passport. They also have a travel document with their picture in it, stamped very boldly and on this document, and in their passport, if they have one, they can work. We still have to apply for a social security number, it takes 2 weeks. Because not many employers will take people without social security numbers, but refugees come with those documents. Asylum seekers have to go to their hearings and apply and then wait for that work permit. But refugees can step off a plane and take a job the next day. Probably 4 people in my office. So here, one of my coworkers, I met her the day after to take her grocery shopping, and I knew right away that she would be working at Chris within a few weeks, that she was. And she won't work here very long. She can make more money elsewhere. But anyway, I knew right away, I'm like, we'll hire her. We need her language skills, and she's got a PhD and yada yada. So she worked right away. So, John?
Yeah, You talked about asylees being, screened at the border and then their case would be heard within
About a year and a half.
I've heard an awful lot of media that it goes out several years.
It does go on several years. And the rejection rate in Ohio is extremely high.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rejection rate in Ohio is extremely high. So there are some protections for some people in some countries from this. You'll hear about it. The president and the Congress can also pass some, legislation that'll just temporary protected status. You might hear TPS. It's like, we don't have a relationship. Actually, it's over now with Venezuela for some people, but we don't have a relationship with Venezuela anymore. We don't fly planes there. We cannot send them back. So they'll be protected, but those statuses are very limited in scope. So you may talk to people about that.
We got people crossing the border, they aren't from Mexico or even Venezuela, they're from all over the freaking world.
Yeah.
And sending them back, has a whole lot of problems, one being they won't be allowed back, the other is
Yeah.
getting.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on asylum seekers. I know there's different ideas and I know there's some problems with it, but many of those people are working through the process and they're finding jobs. If they're undocumented and they can't work yet, they can usually find a social security number and pay taxes even. They're not working, they're paying taxes. So yes, some things, I'm not here to say that it isn't, there's some problems with it, but the immigrants and refugees and even undocumented immigrants are way less likely to commit a crime. Why would you? You just left a war. You don't want to go to jail. You want to work, I mean, by definition, way less likely, way more likely to take some of those jobs we have. But yeah, and the word needs to, yeah, so. Yes.
Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
I was wondering, if this, can be shared, or is it?
Yeah, it's kind of private, but I can send like the PDF of it. So that's what I usually do. And so I didn't even bring I'll make a sign up sheet and I'll get your email and we can talk about it. How about that? Because
My second question, you mentioned about how the refugee get here. And I think you said the US, get a loan.
Yeah, it's
no interest loan.
a no interest loan.
So my question is, do the refugee pay back? that
Yeah,
loan?
a lot of times that's how they establish credit. And I have had some people come up to me and be like, my parents didn't pay back the loan. We really need to do that. Can you help me get the number and do it? It's kind of drilled into them in the process. At 6 months, you start paying back. And you can call and say, look, right now, only one family's working. They can only do 35 a month. The US government works with them, but that's how they establish credit. So yeah, they pay it back.
And, sorry, last question. If I understand properly, you guys work mostly with refugee, not asylum people.
No, we are working with some parolees right now, Haitians, Nicaraguans, but I wish we did. We don't have an asylum program right now. Although we have, some of us do that as our side hustle. I'll put it that way. I might do that at
I
night.
was hoping you guys do, because the reason why I was standing there 6 years ago, presenting about Mauritania, country.
Oh, you're from Mauritania?
Yes, the apartheid that was going on there, slavery.
Yeah, it's
that
terrible.
stuff. Yeah, and the past year and a half, 2 years, we have seen over between 13 to 15,000.
Yeah.
The last year of my countrymen, like seeking asylum in the United States, coming from Turkey, Mexico, you just name it, it's just a long route, and like take 6 years, like minimum time,
Yeah.
So most of them settled here.
And it's harder for a while there back, I don't know, this was maybe 2005. Most of my Mauritanian refugee friends, asylum seeker friends, they ended up going up to Canada. It was more open there, but I think that's been cut off a little bit recently.
Yes, it's possible, but I was just wondering, if you guys have any services going on?
You can call anytime and see if you can make an appointment with our legal department. They probably can't take you on as a case, but they can talk to you about, it's like $25 about other send you to the right places. They have folks they work with. Victims of crime, some family services, if they're in the right zip code, we have funding for. So, but it really is an organization that isn't asylum seekers yet. We did a little trial run with it and really liked it, but we haven't been funded for that yet. Great questions.
This is not a question, it's an answer to your question. We have the YouTube link to this presentation, and I can give that to you, and you can access the YouTube.
Yeah.
I presented here 6 years ago.
I remember you.
You guys didn't have that.
No,
I kept on presentation.
we didn't have that, and thanks to COVID, it's the only good thing that came out of it.
You mentioned early in your presentation a cryptic comment about under the prior administration, things got dismantled or something.
Yes.
So I have two questions. What was the nature of that dismantling? What happened? And secondly, under the current administration, has it gotten back
The
to
previous
full?
administration took it from 125,000 to 17,000 right away. So just the numbers really dropped, closed the Refugee Service Center. I don't know tons about the details because I was working in Taiwan at the time and kind of ignoring the United States and trying to figure out Taiwan, but which is also crazy. But so a lot of those things closed. So Columbus had 3 robust refugee resettlement organizations, Us Together, CHRIS, Cambodia Mutual Assistance, a Christian-based one called World Relief. 3 of them closed their doors almost immediately because there was no funding. So we went from a staff of, 40 or 50 down to like a staff of 8. When the next administration came back, they put the numbers way up, but you have to have things all along the way. The travel bans really stopped a lot of people from coming. First, it was just men, and then it was everybody. So that happened in 2017. So people who were all about ready to step on a plane had to go back for a second round of vetting. So we are this week doing family reunifications for people who've been waiting 10 years to join their spouse, caught up in the travel ban, which is still in effect, by the way. It's not completely been taken away. I don't know this stuff. My friend Flanner, if you ever get a chance to her, she stays up on this stuff. So the travel ban, then COVID. And so we are doing family reunifications. We call it bringing people together who were supposed to be together 10 or 15 years old ago when they were split. Now, the last 2 years, it's been at about 60, 125, 120, 100 and 125,000. It was that high bar. And it's been about 60. I think we're at 80 already this year. We're higher this year. We feel like it's getting back. Our staff is over 100 now, and we've had funding to do so. So I think there's also been a private sponsorship thing started called Welcome Corps, and that hopefully is adding to those numbers. So we feel very good about I've been in this 30 years, and it's also dipped other years too. You know what I mean? There are other years where you didn't have funding and stuff. I've done this a long time, off and on. But yeah, that's what happened. I mean, the president decides. The president can say no. A joint, they both have to decide on it. The joint commission. So it went down to 17,000. And then even when it was back up, we were in COVID, right? And then you can see it here. 2020, look how many, we only had 106 clients. It's 684 in 2017, dropped in half because of the travel ban, dropped way down. 106 in 2020, 109 in 2021. Somalis completely disappeared from that list because they were under the travel ban. Most Muslim countries then couldn't come. So you can see how many Somalis you had here. And then here, you're down to nothing. And then 2022 happens at the fall of Kabul. That happened in like a few weeks. So that's how I got my job. That's how I'm funded still, at least for a little while longer. I'm funded through that. And it was great. It wasn't great for them, but I mean, it was great for me to get a job and help them. It was super fun. And 2023, it was just folks from everywhere. It was really, DRC is definitely the most as they're trying to empty those camps and areas. You'll see the Somali numbers rising. That's mostly family reunification. And then the Burmese camps are closed. There are more. There are more. We are the second largest Burmese population in the world outside of Bhutan, Columbus, Ohio. So interesting. So, and what you'll see, we're starting to get a smattering of South and Central America. We expect that number to rise. And that's it. So I always say that. I know people always ask that question. So that was good. But that's why it's kind of decided by the executive and the Congress, and they can decide we're going to be a country that isn't going to be as welcoming, or we're going to work on other things first, or stuff like that. So.
Any other questions?
Is there any questions on the chat thing?
There are no questions on chat right now.
I do have another question. What percentage of your clients would you say come with trauma, and what services do you have for those who've been traumatized?
Great question. And it's a slide we missed somehow in the translation. Trauma is a major slide. I would say all refugees have experienced trauma, whether or not it's affecting them at the moment. There's been some studies that show that it's really 6 months after you get to a place that the trauma really hits, because you're in fight or flight and you're fighting to keep your family alive. But we have many refugees that come who have been raped, who have had children, who have seen war, who have seen their family members die. Our Speakers Bureau has a story for everyone. We have a part-time staff member who does kind of triage. We can read some reports and we decide beforehand who we are going to refer to counseling right away. So we do triage when they first get here, and then we set them up with counselors in their own language. But yeah, I think that all refugees, I mean, I worked with Cambodian refugees way back in the day. And so they've all experienced trauma, and trauma-informed care is a big part. Say you wanted to be a welcome team, we spend quite a bit of time on that. So, and try to just get people the services they need. We're only 90 days. So we try to set them up. Great question.
Any other questions?
So you're mostly funded by donations or?
Federal government grants, yeah,
Federal
or grants from USCIS, and then I think 125 other grants. So we're always, if we can grant a little position out here or help a little neighborhood over here, or like my position, we do that. But the resettlement part of it with that money for the RNP, that comes from IOM and government.
Theresa, we do have a question now in chat. Does Chris work in any way with Canada regarding refugee support?
No, I like to study their model for fun, but we don't. We work just within the United States. It's a different model. They have their problems. Well, it's very much based on things like welcome teams and community support. It's they give money to the clients for longer, so that they can learn English, and that has its issues too. So different countries. My husband's from the UK, and I've kind of studied theirs because I thought maybe I'll go work there for a while, and it's different as well on maybe a little longer of a runway, I think, but they don't have as much volunteer support as Canada does. So they're all very different. There's a lot of studies out on what works and what hasn't worked. But we have to work within what we have, which is, get some volunteers, get to work fast, start making it.
You mentioned that refugee can be denied and rejected. Right?
At any part of that process.
Yes. Do you have data, country by country on the rejection?
I do not. I haven't studied it very much. That is a great question, and I will look into that. I'm definitely a volunteer seeking person, so I tend to study what makes volunteers want to do things, right? But I am curious about that. Yeah.
So these numbers is just Chris, right?
That's just Chris.
Right, so, and there are other, agencies in town. Like,
ETSS, yes.
Like RIC and.
Yeah. Now RIC is privately funded mostly, and they are helping post-arrival, so they are not resettlement. Right now, ETSS and us and JFS, 3 organizations, are actually working with IOM and, international migration to accept refugee clients, whereas we love the REC. The REC is there to just help the people who move into that community with a lot of the same, getting a job, social services, helping write their landlord. So it's organizations like REC that really help us out and help their neighborhood out. They can just do what they want to. They don't have to buy a bunch of reports. I always tease Emily about that. Like, that's not true, but like they put in a refrigerator in their neighborhood for people to come get food if they needed it. Like, they can just do that. It's cool.
Any other questions? Anything else? Well, thank you so much, Theresa.
I can be reached, chrisohio.org. Go to volunteer opportunities. Even if it's not about a welcome team, you can sign up to talk to me anytime. It's right on the webpage. If you want to come and give me an email address, if you want to talk to me, that's fine. If not, that's fine, but you are welcome to get in contact with me. So I can find answers to your questions. I really love Worthington and think it's a great community, so. Goodbye, people online. I never talk to.
And please do remember that our next sharing our stories is on you're failing the quiz, Thursday, May 30th. Okay.